Heather.
Frank Bennett, were you going to keep picking people, or should somebody else do that? Pat, how would you feel about doing that?
Just fine. Just glad I got in. I'm Pat Venturo. I'm part of the Boulder County League's voting methods team, have been for a number of years, and we just keep trucking along. And next, let's see, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Cleland. I am also in the Boulder County League, and with Celeste, I am co-leader of the voting methods team.
Okay. Chris Baum.
I already introduced myself. Must have
Oh, that's what
been
I
a
was.
memorable introduction.
That's what I was figuring out what the heck I was doing. Sorry, Chris. Neil.
Yes, I'm Neil Bergstrom. I'm in the Arapahoe Douglas County League. I'm really just interested in the voting method and kind of want to keep up on what's going on new developments and what could be a way forward.
Hey, Tony.
Tony Larson, I'm in the Denver League, and technically I am the liaison to from the task forces to the people who run the organization now.
Great. Jan Koch?
Koch, yeah. I'm Dan Koch from Fort Collins. I'm a member of the Approval Voting Party, Approval Voting Advocate, and
Okay. Mark Parsons.
You're muted, Mark.
Hi, sorry. Like your rug, Frank.
Thank you.
You can see my rug in the background as well, perhaps. But anyway, I'm Mark Parsons. I'm also with the voting methods team of the Boulder County League. We're an enthusiastic group.
Hey, Mark Bonhorst.
Hi, I'm visiting from Minneapolis. I'm a retired public sector attorney, University of Minnesota General Counsel's Office. I've been working on presidential election reform for about 6 years. I'm new to the league. As of last April or so, I connected with Celeste in maybe May. I've attended a couple of the meetings. I've been able to watch your video broadcasts, the rebroadcast. I think that's a valuable service. Thank you so much.
Great.
And let's see, I'm working on a law review article on the constitutional pedigree of approval voting. It's almost done.
Okay, welcome. Betsy.
Yes. Is there more than one Betsy or?
No.
Not on my
Okay.
screen.
All right. Betsy.
There are a lot of Franks and Marks.
Betsy McBride, zooming from Boise, Idaho. And yeah, we have a ballot initiative on the works that sounds very much like the one that's being filed in Colorado with open primary and followed by ranked choice. And this probably isn't the time, but Celeste, tell me when I should tell you what the survey results are for that combination in Idaho. The Public Policy Institute at Boise State did a survey.
Why don't you tell us right now? How long will it take you?
Not long. There was a lot of support for open primaries. I don't have the it's 74% favor the open primaries, but top four for the general, only 29% said they would favor this combination. So they really like the one part of it, but not necessarily the second part.
In Colorado, they're putting the two parts together also. They're not separate, they wouldn't separate those. So that's, California just does top two you vote for one in the general, and then Louisiana does, everybody runs together, and if you get 50% plus, you win. Otherwise, you go to a top two runoff. So that's, I guess, a separate option without a better voting method, but interesting. Okay, shall we move on? I will go ahead and start sharing my screen again. Okay, so I hope you can see it. Here's other news that's happened in the last month or so. The Greeley-Weld County lawsuit, the county filed a motion to dismiss. The plaintiffs have filed a response, and they haven't heard anything back yet. The next three items on here are about the title board and ballot initiatives. So the three initial ones from December did not make single subject, so the sponsors had to go back to the drawing board, and I sent in the invitation to this meeting to the whole email list, a spreadsheet showing how the next 20 break out, and we'll look at that again. 12 of those 20 met single subject, but there was a lot of talk about being open for a rehearing. So the deadline for a motion for rehearing is Thursday at 5 p.m. And we'll see if anybody files a motion for rehearing. Since some of them are different, you'd have to do your motion specific to whatever part is on there. And I think 4 of them will go on no matter what, because they probably are single subject. But anyway, I don't understand the process that well, even though I have in 2020, I filed a motion for rehearing. The town of Superior is writing a home rule charter. They're thinking a little bit about proportional representation. They don't really know what it is. And then every month, Fair Vote Canada has a proportional representation webinar that I encourage people to check out and ask questions. And we would talk a lot more about proportional representation if we met every week in this group. Okay, the next meeting date right now is scheduled for Monday, February 26th, 5:30 to 7 on Zoom, because February 12th, there's a big meeting with Larimer County, and February 19th is President's Day. Last month, we had 3 people from Larimer County here. I think this time Jan so far is the only person, but Jody Deschen is also registered for this meeting, so maybe she'll show up. One of the 2 designated representatives for the big initiatives we're going to talk about is from Fort Collins / Larimer County. And she was actually the leader of the Fort Collins for our RCV for Fort Collins campaign. So, okay, there are various things we can talk about next time, but we'll see. Mostly it'll probably be follow up on today's topics, because we never have enough time to do everything we want to do. Okay, is there anything people here would like to work on or talk about that isn't already on this list? I want to point out that program planning is coming up. And so if there's anything that we want to have this state league consider for a position, or something that the National League should consider for a position, this is the time to talk about it. One of the things that the Boulder County League did was we added a paragraph to the voting methods position, talking about reporting of election results, undervotes, overvotes, and this would bring more light to the whole question about majority, which we'll talk about. Mark Bonhorst, do you want to talk right now about what Minnesota is doing in terms of recommending a position?
Sure. We had it's Minneapolis had that's the only one I can speak to, but we had our program planning meeting on Saturday. And I recommended that we recommend to National that they take up the question of open primaries. I didn't recommend a position, but simply that they should take it up in some fashion. One possibility is that they would, recommend to leagues around the country that we look at it, various leagues look at it. But that's the thing and I assume the state's going to send that on to National. I'm not sure what the process is. But that's the update.
I think you had said they recommended either the the Alaska model, which we'll talk about today, which is what Idaho's considering, or the California model, which is like a top two.
The recommendation was just that they look at the broad
Okay.
question. It wasn't suggestion of any particular position.
So it's not to adopt a position, it's a study, it's to have a study?
Or not. I mean, just to consider it in one fashion or another.
Okay.
I didn't try to prescribe what they might do.
Okay. And I see Betsy has a comment about an article a couple of days ago calling for a 28th Amendment, which would guarantee the right to vote. Was this Rick Hazen? Okay. So he pointed out that we're basically the only democracy, correct me if I'm wrong on this, we're like the only democracy that doesn't have an affirmation to the right to vote in our Constitution, something like that. Okay. Anything else people want to talk about before we move on?
Yeah, I'd be interested in talking about these two new methods that I've just recently learned about called AADV, which is approval, disapproval voting, and best alternative, worst voting, which are modifications of approval voting. And so far, I haven't been able to discern that they're any better or worse than approval voting, but I really haven't gotten into it. I don't know if anybody else has and could explain in simple terms why they work better or don't work better.
So Chris, aren't you hosting a meeting next Thursday about these two?
Yes.
You want to talk about it at the next meeting?
Of your meeting?
At our next meeting next month?
I was kind of hoping somebody'd heard of these things and say, oh, this is trash and we should ignore it, or no, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread and we should really jump on it. The big thing in summary that I figured out about AADV is the disapprove. You are allowed to disapprove of one candidate. So you can approve of, I think you're only allowed to approve of two candidates and disapprove of one. Now, if you have 5 candidates on your ballot, I guess that means you just get 3 votes. But unlike approval voting, I think you can vote for all 5 if you want. I mean, that would be stupid, but you could, or just vote for one, which would also be, I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just, that's the way people would feel. And then if you vote to disapprove a candidate, that offsets an approval from another voter, but you only get one of those. So Frank, were you going to say something?
I look forward, I'll attend your meeting on Thursday, and I quizzed Neil on his thoughts without investigating it by myself.
This is Neil McBurnett, by the way.
Neil McBurnett, and his comments was he implied that it was overcomplicating a simple system needlessly.
That's kind of
And-
where I'm coming down.
And so I think on Thursday, let's fight it out.
Okay. Okay.
Chris, would you put some information about the Thursday meeting in it's Thursday this week, right? Thursday
Yes.
this week. Would you put some information about it in the chat so people can join, or you could put your email if people want to attend or something like that? Mark, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a historical oddity. I think that's the way the Venetians did approval voting for 500 years. You had two urns and you could put one a yes, the other a no. Or you didn't have to put your ball in either urn.
Hmm.
So doesn't mean it's a good thing now, but just some context.
Thanks. Anything else we want to talk about? I will go ahead and share my screen and get back on the regular topics we've been talking about. But maybe we should talk about AADV next time. And you mentioned the other one, but I didn't get to write it down. So you could write it down, Chris.
BAWV, which is best alternative worst voting. I haven't really dug into that, but as I understand it, I like John Smith the best, but Mary Jones would be my alternative, and I definitely don't like Frank Atwood.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen again. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is Kent Theory's constitutional initiatives, which have been in the news a lot in Colorado. And this is basically the spreadsheet that I sent you. I may not have, there are a few columns off to the side that you can't see because this is already small print. You might be able to see that some of these are crossed out. The ones that are crossed out did not make single subject. The ones that are highlighted in yellow really are single subject. You can see like for 135, there's only 1 1 in that row. For 136, there's only 1 1. So those are really single subject. So there wasn't much doubt that those would make single subject. Here I've cleaned it up a little bit, taken out the 8 that did not make single subject. They were all the timely reporting combined with something else. The Secretary of State and the other members of the title board just really did not like combining timely reporting, which meant they wanted all the results basically by midnight on election night, which is, as many election workers will tell you, impossible to do. Okay, let's talk about these ballot initiatives and the title board. So what is the title board? The title board, and Tony Larson took me to my first title board meeting and has taught me, was my first teacher on the title board. They determine whether initiatives adhere to the single subject rule. That's their main job. And then they also write up the ballot title language so that it adequately represents the proposed changes. The ballot title language is what the voters will see on the ballot. That's separate from the ballot text, which is all the details. And back here, you can see that 5 of the proposed changes are constitutional and only 1 is statutory. The 5 constitutional changes, we asked, why do you want to put it in the Constitution? And the typical answer is, well, then the voters can't change it, then the legislature can't change it. The only way you can change it is by having a vote of the people to change it, or the Supreme Court declares it's unconstitutional and then it gets taken out. But an interesting thing is that when I asked Kent Theory's right-hand guy, what about why these are constitutional, his argument was, if we write it into the Constitution, we don't have to write all the detailed language. We can write the broad idea and let the Secretary of State and the legislature figure out the details. And it's simpler to sell to the voters. And you have to have 55% of the voters supporting it in order for it to be a constitutional change, to get changed. But their feeling is the simpler language is worth a few extra percentage points. So I found that very interesting. A very political calculation. Okay. The title board consists of 3 people: the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the Office of Legislative Legal Services, or their designees. And they accept public comment prior to a hearing and accept motions for rehearing for 7 days after a hearing. So the big topic that probably most of you are here to hear about is the all-candidate primary and top 4 IRV. And this is what Alaska uses. This is what Idaho is considering. Some people call it the Final Four Alaska model. I saw Neil Bergstrom in the chat put this, I think you probably put this Final 5 video. It's like a 3-minute video, and it explains how it works. Basically, all candidates run together. They call it a nonpartisan blanket primary. Blanket means everybody runs together. Nonpartisan means, it doesn't mean there aren't party labels. It just means that the top people win, regardless of party. If you just, in the old days, a blanket primary meant everybody ran together, the top Republican advanced to the general, the top Democrat, even if, there were the 4 highest vote getters were Republican, only the top Republican would advance, only the top Democrat. That was a regular blanket primary, and the courts deemed that unconstitutional or invalid or whatever. So I don't think anybody does that now, but we'll show an example of what happened in Alaska. You have a choose one primary. So all the candidates run together, you get to pick one, and then the top 4 go on to an instant runoff voting general election. Instant runoff voting is the most common form of ranked choice voting, but ranked choice voting is a group of voting methods, so we like to use the specific name when we're talking about a specific one. An interesting thing that came up during the title board meeting is that by saying you must have this voting method, this choose one primary and this top 4 IRV for the general, that would forbid a better voting method in the primary for these affected offices. So by requiring one thing, you're forbidding something else, which a lot of people might not realize. And then RCV for Colorado is quite opposed to these initiatives because minor parties are no longer assured a spot on the general election ballot. And it's hard to get on the general election ballot when you run against everybody in the primary. So does any questions about this slide? We're going to go into more details. This is just the first. And I see there's something in the chat, but I need somebody else to monitor the chat.
That was just me putting my meeting information in there.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, here's a picture of Alaska's August, sorry, I can't read because I've got things on the screen up here that won't go away. Whoops. There are about 50 candidates on this ballot. So they're all in tiny print. You probably can't read them, nor can I. But this was in 2022. This was the special primary. You got to choose one. And then here were the results of the top candidate the top candidates. You can see Santa Claus was one of the top candidates. Sarah Palin is the name most people know best. And she got 27% of the votes. Nick Begich, who has a long history in Alaska. His, grandfather was a governor, his uncle was senator, that kind of thing. Got 19%. Al Gross got 13%. He had run earlier for US Senate in the regular election 2 years earlier, I believe. And Mary Peltola came in fourth with 10%. And then Al Gross dropped out. And he dropped out too late to be replaced. So he should have been on the ballot, but he didn't, you'll see here's the final ballot that was used in August 2022. There are only 3 names on there. Here it is blown up, so you can see the 3 names. And you could rank up to 4 candidates because I guess write-ins were allowed, although when we do our calculations, when I show you the numbers, we're not going to worry about the write-ins because they were inconsequential. So far, so good on this. The first one, there were 50 candidates and you could choose one. Now there are 3 candidates in the top 4 general. Okay, so here's what happened in round 1. You count the first choice votes. Here you look at only the first choice column. And Mary Peltola got the most. She got 40%. She got a lot of Al Gross's votes. Maybe she got a lot of Santa Claus's votes, who knows? And then Sarah Palin came in second, barely beating out Nick Begich, who has the family history in Alaska, although the Begich family has traditionally been Democrat. So he's run as a Republican and his family actually supported Mary Peltola. I gather he grew up like in Florida or something, and then he went back to Alaska a few years earlier. So because nobody got 50% plus, we have to eliminate the lowest vote getter. That's the way instant runoff voting works. And round 2, Mary Peltola wins with 48% of the votes. 6% of the people put Nick Begich first and then nobody second. So those votes are exhausted. And you can see that nobody got a majority here. So the league, when they're talking about doing this in Colorado, we pushed hard against the word majority because the single subject for these initiatives says to expand voter choice and to ensure majority support. And you can see here, Mary Peltola did not actually get majority support. So it's something to be careful about. There was another big issue with the Alaska election, which we're not going to talk about right now, but we can talk about that another time. It doesn't have to do per se with the way that the Colorado initiatives are written. Okay, does anybody have questions on the Alaska model? Because there are 3 or 4 more sections to talk about in the initiatives. But this is the one they are most excited about. They have funding $8 to $10 million from out of state. So they're really pushing this top 4 IRV.
Who's
Okay.
they? Who's they?
Ken Theory is behind the initiatives,
Okay.
and he's a very wealthy man. Used to be the CEO of DaVita. He has he funded the amendments Y and Z and worked with the League of Women Voters to create the independent redistricting commissions for the congressional districts and the state legislative districts. He also funded, I believe, I know he worked on, I'm assuming he funded the initiatives to have unaffiliated be able to vote in primaries. And then he worked on one other one, which I think was getting rid of the Gallagher Amendment. So, any
Is
other
your-
questions?
Your assessment and possibly Neil's, I don't know if you know Neil's assessment, do you view this as a fair election, this Alaska instant runoff voting election? Because I noticed that in the beginning, Mary Patola was pretty much at the bottom, and then she ends up winning.
Well, I would say that if you're looking at this,
Yes,
I mean, only a quarter of the people voted for the top vote getter. So if you were choosing the winner based on just this election, that would definitely not be fair. What having the second round makes it much fairer. Yes. You know, no voting method is perfect. I don't want to say, I don't want to, I'm not going to speak because no voting method is perfect. The League of Voters of Colorado doesn't actually take a stand on any one particular method. We want to keep our options open. We want to see them in use on the ground so that we can have more data to make better decisions. So, okay. I'll move on to timely reporting of top 4 election results. So in the original initiatives that were presented in December, this requirement to have election results reported by counted by ballots counted by election day was in its own separate section. And this time they have incorporated it inside of the top 4 election results. So this is, I think I can safely say that the League of Women Voters of Colorado is opposed to this. And it's also worrisome because there's so much talk about election conspiracies out there that if you start saying if you start instilling doubt about the elections, I think it's going to cause problems. Does anybody have anything they want to say about this?
You said that this was included in the timely results is included in the top 4
Yeah. You can see
proposal.
it's like number 5 in that section, 5A, 5A1.
So how does
So
that get past the single subject thing?
they're saying it's part of the top 4 election. And it didn't actually make it in any of the ballots, or sorry, in any of the initiatives, except the single, you can see only 136 has it now. It was taken, it didn't pass muster for the others. It did not pass single subject, but it's still in 136. It's all by itself in 136.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want to argue for a motion for rehearing, you'd have a different argument for number 136 than you would for, say, 135, because they don't have any overlap. The ones that are in yellow don't have overlap. So, and they're not going to put all of these out for collecting signatures. They have to figure out which ones they want to do. And the League of Women Voters of Colorado is talking to the proponents, so we'll try to have some influence and we'll see what happens. Okay.
If you have to report the votes by election night, doesn't that mean that some votes that were legitimately cast won't get counted because of people voting from overseas?
And they have something about that, you know, like they say, they mention something like, none of this is to say that you can't count the overseas votes and you can't let people cure. So they try to allow, I feel like it's muddying the waters myself by saying, oh, you're gonna announce the results, but you're still gonna let people have results later. Then people are gonna say, wait, which results are right? And I mean, I'm guessing it'll say preliminary results. Tony, do you want to say anything on here?
No, that's the
Yeah.
first thing that occurred to me also was the overseas vote. And I agree, it does muddy the waters and you get two different sets maybe of people who have won or not won.
I mean, in most elections, it won't make any difference. Because there aren't that many overseas votes, I don't think. I don't think it's going to change many winners, but sometimes it might.
Well, and also we say that every vote counts and it's important and all those kinds of things, and to then negate some people, even not a huge number, goes against that principle.
I mean, another thing is you say it won't affect that many elections, but we have a lot of elections. And every year there are some that come down to just a few votes and that aren't decided until those last few come in. So it really does matter.
I did a count of how many different offices I vote on, and it was 40. That seems like a lot.
I mean, last
Are you
year,
voting as two different people, Celeste?
No, but we have 9 city council members and we have 7 school board members and 3 county commissioners and things like that. So
I
it starts.
mean,
Are you in a special
2022
district?
No,
In 2022, the state had 2 out of 8 congressional districts that weren't decided until several days after the election. I mean, this is it happens far too often to just brush it off and say it's not a thing.
Well, and that's right too. On the West Slope, wasn't the difference between
It was Lauren Boebert's district and it was the new district.
it was 500 votes or something in that
Yeah.
realm.
And
546.
And you can't call that until all the votes are in.
and
Well,
it's not the first time it's happened. I remember doing Halloween in the West Coast and wondering what the results were going to be for the election, and we didn't find out for a while.
I think we're in agreement that it doesn't make sense to say that results have to be announced before all the legitimate votes are in. Why would you want to do that?
Agreed.
Right.
Shall we
Yeah.
move on to the next topic? Oh, sorry, Pat.
No, I was just going to say, I was an election judge for 30 years or something in Gunnison. And there were elections that even staying beyond midnight, we did not have the results yet. So it just, can be impossible on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, I just wonder what the consequences are of not meeting the deadline. Does someone get punished?
Betsy has her hand up.
Betsy.
So it's clear to me why in Idaho we're interested in these kind of reforms, particularly the open primaries and these others. But Colorado has very different kinds of politics. So besides who's doing it, Celeste, what's the motivation for moving to this? Is there some force at a different level, some macro force that wants to change this all over the country? I mean, Colorado politics are pretty stable, so why?
I don't know. I mean, I know Ken Theory has a lot of money, and when you have a lot of money, if you want to change, I mean, obviously he wants this change or he wouldn't have included it. So I think you have to ask him. He's not, he lets his people do the talking, but we haven't gotten a good answer. And maybe Tony's going to meet tomorrow with the chief of staff for Kent Theory. So maybe Tony can ask the question. I know that I talked to somebody from the RCV Resource Center who thought this was a poison pill, like they should never do this. Because the county clerks are just going to hate it. The Secretary of State's going to hate it. And they did actually take it out of every initiative they could take it out of. So yeah, Tony, will you report back to us next month about why this is in there?
Yes, yes.
Do your
Celeste.
best. Thanks. Okay. Let's move on to the next one, which is petition-only ballot access. So right now in Colorado, there are two paths to the ballot. There's the party caucus and assembly process. And then there is the petition process. And I actually worked in 2019 with Senator Fenberg to lower the number of signatures required to collect signatures, number of signatures required to get on the ballot, because that was when we had allowed people who were unaffiliated to vote in primaries. And suddenly we were bumping up the number. It was 20% of the people who voted in the primary for a county office had to sign your petition. So it was going from like 4,000, which was of a high number, to like 18,000, which was crazy. So we were able to lower it, and it was in a huge election omnibus bill. And I remember a county clerk came up to me and said, "That's the only part of the bill I like." Or that's the best part of the bill. Or I mean, there were some controversial parts of the bill, but evidently the part that I was working on was not controversial. Everybody liked it, except, yeah. So it was a little controversial for the minor parties. Steve Fenberg thought that the minor party candidates should collect a lot of signatures too. We didn't agree, but it was his bill, so we did what we could. Anyway, so if you take away one path to get on the ballot, if you take away the caucus and assembly process, and you only have collecting signatures, you're going to have a whole lot more people collecting signatures. It's going to take the clerk a lot more time to collect signatures and to verify those signatures. Only the wealthy candidates will be able to get on the ballot, which limits voter choice. So the title board rejected the words voter choice and rejected the word majority when they set title. They didn't put either of those words in the ballot title, but they didn't change the text of the measure. So there seems to be a disconnect there. Three of the measures would reduce the number of signatures required. Tony?
Yeah, I don't know which final text you're working from. So I've got 1, 2, 4 that I've been reading today.
1, 2, 4 is everything pretty much.
Okay. Sorry about the sirens.
I need to leave.
They're
Thank
going
you
off
though,
the
Celeste.
Thanks for
Gender-
coming, Frank.
Bye.
So I don't understand this. There's a.
1, 2, 4 does not reduce the number of signatures.
No,
Only
and
one.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping
Yeah,
to
okay.
another topic. Whereby all candidates who qualify for the ballot, regardless of political party affiliation or nomination or lack thereof. What's nomination in this case? Who's nominating? Where's it come from?
So right now, the process is if you win your party's primary election, you become the nominee. That
But
is
I
your-
want to know what this means for this proposal. if there, where in the process is there a nomination?
So if you eliminate caucuses and assemblies, then the way you would become a nominee for the general election ballot is by winning the primary ballot, being one of the top 4. That's the way I read it.
Well, it's not the way I read it, so I'll just ask Jason.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Nomination, party nomination is different from nominating a candidate to be on the primary ballot, for instance. I mean, yes, nominating is basically saying I nominate so-and-so for this. Another very interesting thing is that any registered voter can sign any candidate's petition. So there could be some hanky-panky going on here with one party trying to get somebody from another party on the ballot. You know, the only restriction that's still there, as far as I can tell, is your signature can only count on one candidate's petition per office. So,
but somebody has to check all of that too, which is
yes, that's the clerk time. Yeah. And I actually I filed a motion for rehearing in 2020 against similar measures. I think they were also supported by Kent Theory to require everybody to collect signatures. And at that time, it was actually impossible for a Democrat in Rio Blanco to collect enough signatures from Democrats to get on the Rio Blanco ballot. So that measure would have prevented a Democrat from running in Rio Blanco because there weren't enough registered Democrats. So this last point on the slide takes care of that problem. But it's kind of weird because now what does it mean to have a party label next to your name if anybody can sign your petition? The Secretary of State person on the title board kept saying, this is really going to take away the party's role in the process. And she wasn't sure that was what should happen. So, okay, moving on to the next topic. There is a special provision just to have instant runoff voting for the presidential general election. This would not affect the presidential primary, which is surprising because that's where the focus was after the 2020 primary had Amy Klobuchar and Peter Buttigieg drop out after people had already cast ballots. If there had been ranking, and your number 1 candidate had dropped out, your vote would go to the number 2 candidate. But this is only for the general, which is also kind of interesting. And then it allows for coordination with the National Popular Vote Compact, which Colorado has signed on with. And that says that if states with 270 electoral college votes sign on to the National Popular Vote Compact, then Colorado's electors for the National Popular Vote winner will cast their ballots. So if the National Popular Vote winner is the Democrat and Colorado voted for the Republican, it doesn't matter. The Democratic slate of electors would vote on Electoral College Day because we've signed on to this national compact saying we will go with the national popular vote. Those electors will vote for us. it's trying to get around this problem with the Electoral College electing somebody who's not the national popular vote winner. So we're not at 270 Electoral College votes yet in the National Popular Vote Compact. So right now, we're just in waiting mode for other people to get on or to get rid of the Electoral College or whatever else. Any questions on this? This is
How
only-
does it, how does IRV
So
how it,
it
let's say
would
we have an
only really
IRV.
have an effect if like when Ross Perot and Bill Clinton and whoever the third person was ran. It was George H.W. Bush. Okay.
Yeah.
If those like when those three people ran, Ross Perot got the fewest number of votes. Maybe that's true in Colorado. Let's assume it was true in Colorado. So you would look at Ross Perot's ballots and go to the second choice and transfer the votes on those ballots to the second choice. And then whoever had over 50% of the active votes at that point, the non-exhausted ballots, that person would be declared the winner for Colorado. Unless we were part of the National Popular Vote Compact and it was in effect and we had to go with the National Popular Vote winner.
Well, that was my question. How do you determine the national popular vote if some states are using IRV?
So
Do you just take the first choice votes to determine the national popular vote?
Mark has his hand up and wants to, Mark Bonhorst.
This
wants to
issue was
answer that.
raised like, issue was raised like 3 years ago. With Perot as the example, which is in Maine that year, Perot came in second. So if you count the final votes, George Herbert Walker Bush got 0 popular votes in his home state of Maine. That's a problem that's been out there. It's never been really answered. I assume they're not answering it here. But it's a great argument for using approval voting, because with approval voting, you count all the votes. And you never have a major party candidate who gets 0 popular votes in your state.
That's interesting. I would have thought they would just go with the number 1 round votes for the national popular vote, not the going. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I raised the issue this year in the Minnesota legislature, and ranked choice voting people said the problem will be solved. Still hasn't been answered. And the national popular vote people say we leave it up to the states. They just sort of like wash their hands of it, Pontius Pilate, and we'll decide whatever the states decide. Well, that means the states have to decide.
Okay, interesting. Maine has the interesting thing of they also do, they split their votes 3 ways, 2 for the state, 1 for Congressional District 1 and 1 for Congressional District 2. So they have to actually conduct 3 instant runoff voting elections.
Mm.
Just to make it more complicated. Okay. We could talk about elections all day long.
Maybe we could let Maine join Canada. They seem to like those weird kinds of voting.
I'm a big fan of Fair Vote Canada, so I'm interested in listening to those discussions. They're actually going to have an election or some kind of vote in Canada about whether you can have assemblies, like public meetings to help decide policies, or to put policies on the ballot or something. And this is an idea which is great for citizen participation and increasing citizen knowledge and thinking about all citizens. And if you want to you can go to Fair Vote Canada and learn more about it. I'm not doing it justice with my little explanation. Okay, moving on. This is a big deal topic. The Kent Theory initiatives would hold special elections to fill state legislative vacancies. The current process for filling a state rep or state senator is that you look at the person who's leaving office at their political registration, and that party gets to convene a vacancy committee. So the pros of calling a vacancy committee, you've got a quick replacement. It's like 3 weeks usually, maybe a month. Whereas a special election, often takes 45 days to call the election, and then you have to set it up, and then it's not going to be, it's never going to be as fast as a vacancy committee. And the vacancy committee doesn't cost the state anything. The political party picks up the tab. So the cons, which are pretty major, is that it's not very democratic. I think that the most recent vacancy committee had less than 20 people picking the replacement for Representative Ruby Dixon. His name is Chad something Clifford, maybe. And then another con for vacancy committees is that it allows the office holder to quit because the balance of power doesn't change. So Ruby Dixon, she quit, and she knew that her seat would be filled by another Democrat. And this has meant that so many people have resigned. A few have died, but most people have resigned. And that means that I think it's going to be up to 30 of the 100 legislators will have gotten a seat or the party nomination due to a vacancy committee. So if we have time, we can talk about some of the ideas that are floating out there besides special elections. But this is a bit controversial. There are many elected offices that are filled in different ways, and I've got a chart to show people. So why don't we move on, and we'll come back to these ideas. So let's talk about the League of Women Voters and these initiatives. We met in December and January with Kent's Guy and Unite America's Emily Baller. We have some general concerns about these being constitutional changes, about language inaccuracies. We have some content concerns, especially like the cost of special elections to fill vacancies and the requirement to report results on election night. Do you think this is fair, Tony, or am I misrepresenting something?
No, but I've been thinking today, I'm trying to find some more reasons either way. So I haven't finished working on that part of it, this part of it.
I think that finding the reasons to support it is, we'd like to be at the table. So that's, if we like it, we can let it go. But if we don't like it, then we need to speak up. So, so I guess I'm more worried about our concerns. And then the final concern here is trying to use instant runoff voting statewide is going to result in some pushback from the county clerks and the Secretary of State. For instance, El Paso County does not uses, I think it's called Clear Ballot, which does not have certified software to use instant runoff voting. And right now, instant runoff voting is only allowed for municipalities and special districts, not for the whole state, not for legislative districts. So this is a big, big, big change. I'm in favor of big changes, but I think I'd like to see the initiative backers working more closely with the county clerks and the Secretary of State myself. So.
You didn't say anything about majority.
Language inaccuracies in the text.
Okay, you want to,
Well, I showed the Mary Peltola slide where she got 48%. And that's not a majority. So our big problem with the word majority is they say majority support. Usually you think majority, oh, majority of the voters supported the winner. But in that Alaska election, 48% of the voters supported the winner. So you can, it's often reported as percent of the active votes in the last round, which is a mouthful, and they don't want to say that, but that's the accurate way to say what the majority is. When anytime you say majority, you have to say majority of what. If you just say majority support, people are going to think majority of the voters who voted. That's the standard.
yeah, there are two definitions of majority. One of them is most of the votes, and the other is 50 plus 1.
I would disagree. I would say majority always means 50%, over 50%.
Not according to the dictionary. So it's confusing if you say the person who won the majority votes and it was only 33% but it was more than anybody else. He's got the majority of the votes.
This is why we have the word plurality. Plurality means first past the post. The person who gets the most votes is the plurality winner. Sometimes that's also the majority winner if they get over 50%. I think if you look at Colorado statute, majority means over 50%. Like, but it's over 50% of the votes cast. So for instance, Broomfield briefly had on its website, it said, instant runoff voting passed in Broomfield with 48% of the vote. And it was 48 or 49, whatever the number, lower than 50%, because they were counting the blank ballots also, the people who turned in a ballot but did not vote on that ballot question. So another way to measure majority or measure support is to say support of the ballots cast. In Colorado, usually if you leave a question blank, it's because you don't know much about it or you don't have an opinion about it. In France, they call it a white ballot, and it's often a protest vote. In Utah, they have on their elections none of the above. I met a guy who had a name tag. It had his name and then it said NOTA for none of the above. He was a big proponent of that. But if you count the NOTA votes, the none of the above votes or the blank ballots, if you do that for Boulder's mayoral election, nobody got a majority in the mayoral contest. So I don't, there are at least 3 different ways to measure majority. Majority of what is the big question. And I would argue that the general meaning is majority of the votes cast, not majority of the ballots cast, although some people argue we should do it that way. But majority of the votes cast. And so when I pointed out the 49% in Broomfield passage of instant runoff voting, they quickly fixed, you can say fixed their website, so it didn't say that anymore. But I got a screenshot.
I got to play with it, and that's not what we want. So
Okay,
anyhow, I
Celeste,
think there's a question here.
Celeste, I've got to leave in a minute, but I want to just say one thing about this. This is, I think, an example of where when you specify one thing, you're preventing everything else.
Mm,
And
mhm.
in reaction to what happened in Alaska, a bunch of professors from major universities have said, well, you know, we could use a different algorithm for ranked choice voting. And we look at how IRV would affect what's going to happen with IRV given the partisan divide in the nation, and what would happen with this other algorithm. And what IRV is going to do, if they're right, is going to systematically elect more hyper-partisan representatives than another softer algorithm. So by specifying IRV, you're foreclosing that whole field of research and intellectual conversation from being, you know, informing what Colorado is going to do in future years. I mean, maybe in 2 years, the professors all around the country are going to say, this is way better than IRB. You got IRB, you're prohibited from using anything else. And I think in terms of the Secretary of State's concerns, for a state with a highly decentralized system, which I think Minnesota has also, why not use approval voting? It eliminates the spoilers. It gets you a fair result. And anyway, I think all the objections to approval voting, like, you know, voting against your favorite if you vote for somebody else, I think under top 3 or top 4, those objections don't really work, and it's a far superior system. So again, by locking yourself into IRV in the Constitution, you're prohibiting fair consideration of other things that might turn out to be far better.
It's definitely true that the RCV movement, which includes IRV, is mostly IRV,
Yeah.
has a lot of momentum, has a lot of money, and is sucking up all the oxygen in most discussions. You know, you'll say to somebody like, have you heard of approval voting where you can vote for all the candidates you support? And they say, oh yeah, I like RCV. They think anything that's different is RCV. They only know one kind of voting alternative. And
Yeah.
so that's, so
I mean, one
it's
suggestion is to let well, I mean, these people are just totally committed to IRB. So maybe they've got the $10 million. I listened to last month's presentation. So realistically, you're probably stuck with going with this or nothing. But you know, one option is to give the legislature the discretion to use IRV or a different algorithm or approval voting, or as it determines is appropriate.
so as Mark actually read the report for the Rhode Island Senate Commission on better voting methods, and they considered IRV, approval voting, top 2 voting, and runoffs. Top 2 like the California model, and they didn't make a recommendation in the end. They couldn't, which was interesting because usually IRV gets the press. And I thought, based on the emails from the senator running the commission, who is my brother's senator, that IRV was going to end up being the choice, but in the end they chose not to make a recommendation. So that's very interesting.
But they did say that they considered ranked choice voting and top 2 to be 2 changes that would benefit democracy. They didn't make it. But the other thing is they discussed Condorcet voting briefly, and they said it's just another form of ranked choice voting. In other words, you just use a different algorithm on a ranked choice ballot.
Well,
It's a huge difference.
It's a different form of ranked voting, but it's ranked choice voting is you eliminate the lowest vote getter. That's like, there are a lot of ranked voting methods that are not ranked choice.
Right.
So
So what these other professors are suggesting is more of a Condorcet board
yeah.
vote.
Okay.
I'm just saying that the folks in Rhode Island just elided over what is really a fundamentally important issue.
Yeah. You reminded me that we're basically out of time. I had really wanted to talk about other options for filling vacancies. I heard today from Colorado Sun, I might have an opinion piece in the Colorado Sun about options for filling vacancies. This is what the options are right now. And I made this into an easier chart to read so that there are 3, 4, 5, 6, sort of 7 different ways that vacancies happen, or you could even say fewer. You could say special election, line of succession, appointment, or a vacancy committee. But I don't think we have time to go over all this if we're respecting time and people want to leave. So maybe I'll stop sharing. And we can see you next month, I guess.
Thanks, Celeste. That was a lot.
Here's the last.
Do people feel like they have a better understanding of the different parts of the amendments? This is in the if you go to the Alternative Methods Task Force page, these slides are in the directory there. So I can go there and put the link. I'll share my screen again.
I'm gonna run, but thanks, Celeste.
Okay, I'm sure you can find it if you want to. Okay, so here's the League of Women Voters of Colorado website. Go to task forces, go to alternative voting methods, and then here it says task force meeting slides and videos are available here. If you click on that, go to today's initiatives and vacancies, which we didn't really get to vacancies so much. Open it up, and then there are the slides. And I'll probably take off most of the vacancy slides since we didn't get to it, but that's the way it goes with this group. There's always so much to talk about.
Okay, thank you very much, Celeste. I will say that for me, I need to go over this stuff again and again and again, and then something clicks on each time I go over it. I think it's very helpful.
Good. So Tony, you have access to those slides. Maybe they'll be helpful. Yeah. Neil, thanks for the numbers for Chad Clifford.
Thanks for running the meeting.
Sure. Happy to have you here. Okay.
Thank you, Celeste. See you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Beth, I guess we can stop a recording. I don't know how to do that.